The crowd held its breath as Clara Whitmore stepped onto the gallows, the sun beating down like judgment. Her dress, once sky blue, was now stained with dust and defiance. The sheriff's voice boomed, the noose swung, and the hangman reached for the lever. Children watched wide-eyed. A woman crossed herself. No one spoke in her defense. Clara's green eyes scanned the silent mob until she closed them, bracing for the end. The wind howled across Dusty Hollow as the noose tightened around her throat. Clara Whitmore stood alone, condemned not for hate, but for healing. The townsfolk called her a witch. They built the gallows before they asked the truth. But just as the trapdoor creaked beneath her feet, an arrow sliced the sky. Clara Whitmore never meant to become a symbol of fear. She only meant to help. Dusty Hollow was a sunburnt town, carved from grit and gossip, where the church steeple cast longer shadows than the law. Clara had lived there all her life, a quiet figure at the edge of town with her dried herbs, worn satchels, and steady hands. Some whispered she was a blessing, others whispered louder that she wasn't natural. She learned healing not from books or bottles, but from an old Comanche woman named Silent Willow, who once saved her as a child. From her, Clara learned how to listen, to plants, to fevered lungs, to the kind of pain a doctor couldn't name. Her teas soothed coughs, her salves healed wounds. But her gifts, so welcome in desperation, became dangerous when death came anyway. That death was Abigail Miles. The widow was already weak when she arrived at Clara's cabin, eyes glassy and breath short. Clara stayed with her 2 nights, cradling her hand, wiping sweat from her brow, whispering prayers that bridged both heaven and earth. When Abigail slipped away on the 3rd dawn, Clara wept as if she'd lost a sister. But to Dr. Aldridge, the town's self-important physician, the explanation was simpler. Clara had overstepped. She gave her roots in weeds, he told the townsfolk, not real medicine. And now Abigail is dead. It didn't take long for suspicion to twist into condemnation. The town's grief turned into something easier to carry: blame. People forgot the children Clara had cured of fever. They forgot the bruises she had cleaned, the sleep she had restored. They remembered only what they feared: a woman with knowledge that did not come from men. "She's a witch," someone muttered at the general store. "She talks to the wind," another said. "She sings to dead things," came a third. Sheriff Grady Stone, never one to question a crowd he agreed with, made his decision before the sun even set. Clara was dragged from her cabin, the crystal her mother had given her knocked from her neck and trampled in the dirt. Her hands were bound. Her pleas were ignored. They gave her no trial, only a scaffold. The gallows rose fast, wooden, crude, as if they'd been waiting for an excuse to build it. The same people Clara had once helped now gathered with grim satisfaction in their eyes. Dr. Aldridge stood at the front, arms crossed like a preacher delivering wrath. Clara was offered no defense, only silence. And in that silence, she finally realized something. It wasn't just ignorance that had turned against her. It was fear. Fear of what they didn't understand. Fear of what they couldn't control. Fear of a woman who healed without permission. So when they tightened the noose, Clara didn't cry. She didn't scream. She lifted her chin to the crowd, eyes fierce and steady. If they were going to kill her for kindness, then she'd die with it in her heart. The moment the rope snapped, time broke. Gasps rippled through the crowd like thunder. The noose recoiled upward, limp and useless, as Clara stumbled back, nearly toppling from the gallows. Arrows had flown from nowhere, fast, precise, and meant not to kill, but to interrupt. Another arrow struck the wooden beam beside Sheriff Grady Stone's head, pinning his coat to the gallows post. Chaos erupted. Children screamed. Men ducked. Some reached for pistols. But before a single shot could be fired, a painted horse burst through the settling dust, hooves pounding like war drums across the cracked earth. On its back rode a figure wrapped in buckskin and silence: River Hawk. He wore his name like a second skin, fluid, purposeful, deadly. Long braids whipped behind him in the wind. His bow remained drawn, not trembling in his grip, but steady as bone. His eyes, dark, unblinking, locked onto Clara's. He said nothing to the crowd, only to her. "Choose." And through the terror, through the noise and disbelief, Clara found her voice. I choose to live. In one swift motion, he urged the horse forward, reached up, and swept her from the platform with surprising ease. Clara barely had time to clutch the fringe of his shirt before the town vanished behind them. She didn't look back. The wind tore through her hair. Guns fired in the distance, but the sound was already behind them. Clara pressed her face into River Hawk's shoulder, the scent of leather, sage, and dust grounding her more than fear ever could. They rode hard, deeper into the wild, past cactus fields, red hills, and dry creek beds. The sun dropped low behind them, and still he rode. Only when they reached the broken shadow of a canyon did he stop. River Hawk dismounted first, then helped her down gently. Her legs trembled from shock, but he didn't speak, just handed her a water skin. She hesitated. He took a sip first, then passed it back. It is safe, he said. The water was warm and earthy, but it soothed the rawness in her throat. She drank until she could feel her body again. Then he handed her something wrapped in soft, worn deerskin, a small crystal, pale and round, etched with what looked like a spiral. It belonged to my mother, he said quietly. Silent Willow. She said it reminds us. Death is not always the end. Clara turned it over in her hand. It pulsed faintly in her palm, warm, as if it remembered the hands it once knew. Somehow, holding it, she stopped shaking. She met his gaze. Why? She whispered. Why did you save me? He crouched to the ground, brushing sand aside with his palm, drawing a symbol in the dust, one she recognized. Two intersecting waves, balance, healing. Because the spirits led me to you, he said. My teacher saw it in a dream. A woman between two worlds, bringing medicine where others bring fire. He rose slowly, his expression unreadable. You are a healer, like me. Clara blinked against the tears burning her eyes. A healer. That word had condemned her just hours before. Now it saved her. They sat in silence as the canyon swallowed the sun. A quiet unlike any she had known wrapped around them. Not the silence of fear, but of space, of truth. She held the crystal tighter. Maybe she wasn't running anymore. Maybe she was being found. They traveled for 2 more days. The terrain grew harsher as the sun climbed higher, painting the land in shades of copper and ash. The air thinned. The silence deepened. And yet, with every mile, Clara felt something loosening inside her, a tension that had lived in her bones for years. River Hawk spoke little, but his presence spoke volumes. He moved with the quiet certainty of someone who didn't follow trails. He remembered them. Like his ancestors had walked this land before, and left every rock and shadow just where he needed them to be. On the 3rd evening, just as the sky bled gold and violet, River Hawk paused on a ridge and motioned for her to dismount. Below them stretched what looked like a bowl carved into the earth by the hands of time. A lush green valley hidden within walls of crimson stone. A ribbon of water wound through cottonwoods and blooming wildflowers. This place, he said softly, is called the breath of the earth. Clara's breath caught. It didn't look real. It looked like a dream a tired heart would conjure when all hope had burned away. A secret kept by the land itself. No one finds it unless the spirits allow, River Hawk continued. Only the chosen, only those who remember. They descended into the valley. The air was cooler here, rich with the scent of sage and damp soil. Everything pulsed with quiet life. Clara could feel it, not just in her skin, but in her soul. As they walked past a canyon wall, her steps slowed. She reached out and brushed her fingertips over a stone surface etched with age-worn symbols, spirals, sunbursts, feathers. I know these, she whispered. River Hawk turned. Silent Willow. She drew them in the dirt when I was 15. She said they were stories, prayers, medicine. He nodded. She was my grandmother. Clara's hand froze midair. Her eyes snapped to his. She saved me once. I had a fever that nearly took me. She gave me a tea and sang to the wind. I never forgot her. Nor did I, River Hawk said. She walked the line between two worlds, like you. They continued deeper into the valley until the trees parted, revealing a shallow stream where smooth stones glistened like bone in water. A sharp cry echoed from nearby, high, broken, and desperate. An eagle. The bird lay by the stream bed, its wing crooked, feathers matted with blood. Clara dropped to her knees beside it without thinking. Its humerus is fractured, she said softly, brushing aside the feathers. We need to clean this. River Hawk joined her, already pulling herbs from a pouch. She mixed water with dried willow bark, while he stripped a reed into cord. Together they splinted the wing, bound it gently, and wrapped it in gauze made from the soft inner bark of the cottonwood. The eagle shuddered but did not fight. When the work was done, Clara placed a palm over its chest. Its heartbeat, once wild and frantic, began to slow. Steady, calm. Riverhawk watched her in silence, then spoke with reverence. You carry her gift. Clara blinked back tears. I thought I'd lost it. I thought maybe they were right. Maybe what I did wasn't real. He shook his head. You never lost it. You only forgot that healing has nothing to prove. She looked at the eagle, still breathing, still here. And for the first time since Dusty Hollow, she felt it rise again in her. Purpose. Not just survival, not just escape, but calling. The first sign of pursuit came on the wind. Riverhawk paused mid-step, his ear tilted toward the ridgeline behind them. Hooves, distant, but closing. Clara could hear them too now, thundering through the canyons, echoing off stone like war drums. The spell of the hidden valley was broken. They've found our trail, Riverhawk said. Clara's heart tightened. Dr. Aldridge? And Sheriff Stone, he nodded. They do not give up what they think belongs to them. They moved fast. Clara struggled to keep pace, her breath ragged as the terrain grew jagged and steep. They climbed through a narrow gulch veined with desert brush, the sun burning down on their backs. Her dress caught on thorns, her boots slipped on gravel. The wilderness was not gentle, but Riverhawk was. At one point he stopped and knelt beside his saddlebag, pulling out a small leather pouch. From it he scattered a handful of crushed leaves, pale green with a sharp, bitter scent. Clara coughed at the aroma. What is that? Witch sage, he answered. It unsettles horses. The smell confuses their senses. They'll turn before they reach this path. Sure enough, moments later, they heard chaos behind them, men cursing, horses rearing. Clara allowed herself a breath, but as they pressed forward through a gap in the rocks, her foot slipped and she reached out to catch herself. The stone bit into her palm. Blood welled instantly. She hissed but said nothing. Riverhawk turned. His gaze fell to her bleeding hand. He didn't speak, not right away. Instead, he took a strip of clean cloth from his pouch and approached her slowly, gently. He cupped her hand in his, warm and sure. You don't have to pretend it doesn't hurt, he said, dabbing the wound with water. Pain doesn't make you weak. Clara looked at him, his focus, his quiet, the way he honored even her smallest wound like it mattered. No, she said softly, but hiding it does. He smiled slightly, a rare flicker of warmth. Then let it be seen. By sunset, the cliffs had given way to open mesas, dotted with juniper and distant columns of smoke. Riverhawk led her down a narrow path toward a ring of roundhouses nestled in the low hills, homes made of bark, hide, and time. The Comanche camp. As they approached, several warriors stepped forward, bows lowered but watchful. At their center stood an elder wrapped in a thick mantle of gray fur, his face weathered, his eyes as sharp as flint. Old Bear. Beside him stood a woman tall and still, her long braids woven with silver feathers. Moonfeather, the spiritual elder. Her silence was heavier than words. You bring trouble, Old Bear said, his voice like dry thunder. I bring truth, Clara replied, standing tall despite her trembling knees. Old Bear's gaze narrowed. Truth is not always welcome, especially when it wears a white face and walks beside a marked man. Riverhawk stepped forward. The spirits led her to me. She healed the eagle. She carries Silent Willow's teachings. Moonfeather stepped closer, her eyes searching Clara's as if looking not at her, but through her. After a long pause, she reached out and touched the crystal around Clara's neck. It shimmered faintly. She carries remembrance, Moonfeather murmured. But remembrance is not enough. She must act. I will, Clara said, not to prove myself, but because healing is who I am. The elders said nothing more, but they stepped aside. River Hawk gently touched Clara's shoulder. They've let you in. For now, she whispered. And so, under the cover of twilight, Clara entered the camp, not as a fugitive, but as a question the spirits were waiting to answer. Night fell heavy over the Comanche camp. Shadows gathered under the roundhouses, and the fire circle burned low, its flames dancing like whispered prayers. Though the tribe had allowed Clara entry, acceptance had not yet come. Not truly, not until the spirits gave a sign. That sign came as a mother's scream. Clara was stirring tea near the fire when the cry rang out. Sharp, panicked. River Hawk rose instantly, eyes narrowing. They've brought him, someone murmured. Two warriors emerged from the darkness, carrying a small boy wrapped in deerskin. His body was limp, his lips pale. A woman trailed behind them, weeping into her hands. Her son, Eli, was burning with fever. Moonfeather knelt beside the boy, laid a hand on his head, then looked at River Hawk. It's deep, she said, a sickness of heat and shadow. River Hawk turned to Clara, then reached into his pouch. He pulled out a bundle of herbs bound in red thread. Sage, white willow, wild mint, and goldenroot. He pressed it into Clara's hands. Are you ready? He asked. Clara looked down at the bundle. The same ingredients she had once used in secret, now given in trust. She wasn't certain, but she knew this much. I will try, she said. They brought the boy into a quiet tent near the stream. Clara knelt beside him, the air thick with heat and silence. She unwrapped the herbs, crushed what she needed into a poultice, and dipped it in stream water, whispering softly in rhythm with the breath of the earth. River Hawk sat beside her, still and grounded. As she worked, applying balm to Eli's chest and neck, cooling his skin with wet cloth, he began to sing, not in English but in Comanche, a low, steady chant that filled the tent like a heartbeat. It didn't overpower, it held. Clara joined him, not in voice but in presence. She closed her eyes and remembered every lesson Silent Willow had given her. Listen first, act second, trust always. Hours passed. The fire outside flickered low. Eli moaned softly. Then his chest began to rise. Slow, steady, rhythmic. Clara's hand flew to his forehead. The fever was breaking. She met River Hawk's eyes. He nodded once, then stepped outside. She has done it, he declared to the tribe, voice loud enough to carry to the stars. She called the fever down. A murmur spread through the camp. Not of suspicion this time, but awe. Inside the tent, Clara brushed Eli's hair from his face, tears stinging her lashes. She hadn't saved everyone in her life, but tonight she had saved someone. Not because she was a witch, not because she was a miracle, but because she knew how to listen, to a heartbeat, to a spirit, to herself. And in that moment, she knew the people of Dusty Hollow had tried to hang her for who she was. But here, she had finally remembered. The morning after Eli's fever broke, the camp woke to quiet reverence. No trumpets, no celebration. Just nods passed around the fire, softer eyes when Clara walked by, and the understanding that something had shifted. She was no longer just the woman who came from dust and gallows. She was now the healer who stayed when it mattered most. That afternoon, as smoke curled from the cooking fires and children played near the stream, River Hawk returned from the ridge with something unexpected. A letter. The envelope was creased, weather-worn, sealed with a cracked red wax. Clara's name had been scrawled across the front in a familiar, careful hand she hadn't seen in years. Her hands trembled as she broke the seal. My dearest Clara, if the healer among the Comanche is you, I am not surprised. You always saw hearts, not skin. You always listened when others shouted. You always knew things I never took the time to understand. I don't ask for forgiveness. I know I surrendered my right to that when I let silence take the place of truth between us. But I ask if this reaches you, that you know this one thing. I hope you are safe. I hope you are loved. That would be more than I deserve. Your father, Thomas Whitmore. Clara folded the letter carefully, her fingers lingering on the words. She didn't cry. Not yet. But something old and bitter inside her chest finally broke loose, like winter loosening its grip on thawing ground. That night, she sat with River Hawk by the fire, the moon rising full and round above them, silvering the cliffs. Sparks from the flames drifted upward like stars seeking home. Clara leaned into him, the letter tucked safely in her pocket, her cheek resting against the warm, worn leather of his shoulder. "I think I found something here," she whispered. Riverhawk turned slightly, his hand brushing a lock of her hair behind her ear. He studied her, not with hunger, but with knowing, with recognition. "Then let us begin," he said. She looked at him fully then, eyes reflecting firelight, and for the first time in years she didn't feel like a woman running from a death sentence. She felt like someone choosing life, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. And maybe that was the truest kind of healing, not just surviving, but building something worth surviving for. The wind that night was gentle, more whisper than howl, as if even the desert held its breath. The Comanche gathered in a wide circle around the central fire, its flames painting the canyon walls in flickering golden red. Elders stood wrapped in robes stitched with memory, feathers braided into their hair. Children clung to their mothers. Warriors lined the edges like sentinels of old. But there was no fear in the air tonight, only something deeper, something sacred. Clara stood at the edge of the circle, heart pounding like hooves on dry ground. Riverhawk was beside her, calm, strong, as rooted as the cliffs that watched over them. He didn't touch her hand, but he didn't need to. She could feel his presence steadying her like the earth itself. Moonfeather stepped forward, carrying a length of ribbon dyed in moonlight and sage smoke. She looked at Clara with eyes that had seen both war and peace, both birth and burial. "You are not of our blood," the elder woman said, "but the spirits do not measure worth by blood alone. They measure it by intention, by truth, by how you carry your hands when someone is hurting." Clara bowed her head, her throat tightening. Moonfeather continued, "Tonight you are not simply joined in love. You are joined in healing. You walk not behind him and not ahead. You walk beside." She took Clara's hand and then River Hawk's, binding their wrists together with the soft ribbon, knotting it once, twice, 3 times. "With the first knot," she said, "we honor the pain you have known. With the second, the healing you have given. And with the third, the future you will build. Not from fear, but from choice." Clara looked up at River Hawk. His eyes shimmered in the firelight, not with tears, but with something deeper. Recognition. She was not a stranger anymore, not a fugitive, not a witch. She was his, and he was hers. They said no vows, none were needed. The fire cracked softly. Drums began to beat, slow and low, like the heart of the world stirring awake. Around them, the tribe began to hum a song of welcome, of unity, of blessing. Clara and Riverhawk stepped forward together, wrists still joined, into the center of the circle. Together, they walked toward a life not built on fear, but on purpose. No one cheered. They didn't need to. The stars above bore witness, ancient and endless, blinking silently as if they too understood what had just happened. It wasn't just a union, it was a promise to live differently, to choose love over silence, purpose over survival, truth over shame. And beneath those stars in the heart of the Wild West, 2 souls, once hunted, once wounded, became something whole. And so Clara and Riverhawk didn't just survive, they chose something better. Not a life defined by fear or judgment, but one shaped by purpose, trust, and healing. Their story reminds us that even in the harshest of times, there are still hands willing to lift, voices willing to listen, and hearts brave enough to love beyond the boundaries the world tries to draw. In today's world, we may not face gallows or outlaws, but we still face fear, misunderstanding, and division. How often do we silence what we don't understand? How often do we judge before we ask? Clara's journey teaches us that healing, whether of the body, the spirit, or a divided community, begins with listening. And Riverhawk reminds us that even those the world calls savage might be the ones carrying the wisdom we need most. What do you take from their story? Do you believe love can still cross the line society draws? Can healing traditions from the past still guide us forward today? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Share what touched you, challenged you, or made you reflect. And if this story stirred your heart, please consider giving it a like, subscribing to The West That Never Left, and sharing it with someone who still believes in honor, redemption, and the kind of love that doesn't ask who you were, only who you're becoming. Thank you for riding with us through dust, fire, and memory. We'll see you on the next trail. Until then, stay true, stay kind, and remember, the West never truly left. It just waits to be remembered.